Welcome to Work Life Cyber. Today I'm going to take you through a few interviewing questions for a third party risk manager. Before we do that, please always be sure. I know you prepare before interviews, but always be sure to not sound like you are reading from a board, and I will walk through it. Just always act natural, act confident, dress up for the interviewing. If it's in person, look straight to the person who asked the question. Even if it's a panel, the person who asks the question, look straight to them, look around a few times if it's more than one person. And if it's a video call, look straight into the camera and answer. Even if you don't know the answer to the question and you're telling them, I'm not sure, let me get back to you on that one. Look straight into the camera and don't make faces. So don't go like, ooh, I knew that. No, straight into the camera and say, let me get back to you on that one. Or I may have to get back to you on that one. And then the interviewer will go to the next. What experience do you have in identifying and assessing third parties in your company? So this one is telling you, how do you know which vendors to assess, right? So, and I'm doing this video actually because I got an email or a text from a couple of you to do a video on this. So that's all it's asking you. How do you pick the vendors? If you've worked for a financial institution before, a group of people will come up with the vendors that the company is looking at using, and then you and your bosses will decide which one goes to you, which one goes to B, which one goes to C. You understand? So in this case, do not sound robotic. I have the answers here. I'm going to tell you how not to sound. I have extensive experience in identifying and assessing third-party risk. In my previous role, I worked with a large financial services company where we had a vendor management program in place that required all third-party vendors to undergo a risk assessment. I would conduct a thorough review of... No, even if you are not on video, they can sense you're reading from somewhere. And if you're on video, they can sense you haven't done it before and you've just memorized it. Even without experience, still don't sound robotic. So they are saying, how do you determine which vendors to assess? In my previous role, we did have a selection method. We weren't the ones who determined which vendors to go with. We would get a list of vendors that the company is looking to use, and then it's up to the team to divide it among ourselves or pick it among ourselves to assess. But in my case, I was my previous one. So I would answer it this way. I would say, we will get a list from a request from the business, which is the business owners will send us a request. Hey, we are going to go with FedEx. We need you to do a risk assessment for them. It was part of the processes. So you can also say it was part of the processes for the business owners to come to security for assessment. So when they come to us, me and our team will decide who should take that vendor. But if you're applying for a manager role, you would probably be the manager. So you would say something like, in my previous role, the business will send us the vendor request. We are not the ones, don't say this, but we are not the ones deciding what vendors to use. I think it's a trick question. The business owners, decide what vendors to use, and all we will do is assess them. So if you are the manager, you're going to assign it to one of your team members. But if you're not the manager, you would say, we get the request from business owners, and then my manager assigns it to me. Then I immediately go in for primary contact. If that was not already provided, I will send an interim or request, pre-assessment. This is to what is your company, just to know whether they are cloud-based or not. You don't have to say all these in an interview. Half of the time, they don't know what you're talking about. So you tell them, I get assigned by my manager. I send them pre-assessment, and once they respond back, I would know what questionnaire to send them. We do have a GRC tool, so I will send them the assessment. It has a deadline, and our deadline was 10 business days. Once I get the responses back, I will review it to tier them low, medium, or high. And if you have a good GRC tool, you don't even have to say this. You say that once we get the response back, a GRC tool will tier them low, medium, high. Once it's low, I don't do much about it. We approve from security standpoint, and then we move on. If it's medium, we check to see if we can still live with the findings or the risk that come with it, if we can accept it. If it's high, we do thorough research to see what the findings are. We check their SOC reports to see if there are very detrimental findings, because sometimes by the time we get the SOC reports, or if you're interviewing for a financial institution, by the time we get the PCI DSS or ISO 2700, I think that's what it is, by the time we get it back, the managers would have resolved it or mitigated it. So I do follow-ups. I check to make sure. It's still not my decision. I just have to give my subject matter expertise, advice on recommendation on it. So I then go back to the business to let them know, here are the findings. We don't recommend you work with this vendor. If you have alternative, please submit them to us. In my experience, I haven't had any business owner that will say, we don't care, we're going to accept it even though it's high. So far, it's either the vendor is low, the vendor is medium, or the business owners are willing to to look for another vendor. The next possible question for a third-party risk management will be, what processes do you use to evaluate financial stability of a company? Now, if you're in the health field, you usually won't get opportunities to evaluate the financial stability of another healthcare field. But if you're applying for a bank or a financial institution, then yes, this question is very relevant. So it's even relevant in a healthcare field, but I'm just saying this question it's more likely in a financial institution than it is a health field. So it'll be that you can say, well, I check, if it's a public company, I check their financial statements, and then I do evaluate their disaster and recovery processes, because a good disaster and recovery will be that you can actually recover. I check their legal history, their legal claim history, because if they've had multiple claims, chances are they don't have enough money to pay for. They're bankrupt because these fees are very expensive. And if they've had legal financial claims, even worse, right? So these are the ones you're going to say, I evaluate their past financial claims, I check their disaster and recovery, and then if it's a public company, I do review their financial statements and credit reports. How do you manage the need to mitigate risk and the relationship with your vendors? All they are saying is that maybe you have a vendor who was great, but now they're high risk. Are you going to stop the relationship and find a new? No, you're going to schedule meetings with them and try to see if it can be mitigated. If it cannot be mitigated, then you put in more, because sometimes switching into a new vendor can cost a lot. So it's up to you, the business owners, but you're still going to do continuous monitoring to make sure that they are still low, or they are still medium, or if they are high, there are steps to mitigating their high risks. So it's a continuous monitoring things. It's a constant scheduling meetings to check to see. That's why third party risk managers or analysts are going to be around for a long time. So don't give up, keep applying. Another possible question would be, how do you ensure your vendors know your policies and procedures? Or at least policies. They don't need to know your procedures, but you still should. But if they say, how do you ensure that your vendors know your policies? Again, just think natural. Think of yourself in an office and you're about to assess a vendor. How do you let them know? Well, once we go ahead with them, we are going to include our policies in the contract or agreements. That's it. Don't think too much. That's how. And if you do updates, you send it to your high risk vendors. Make sure, or your very important vendors, make sure they know that what is happening in your policies. If any major policy changes, you send it to your vendors. I am going to end here because I don't want the video to be too long. I will give another set of questions in my next video. But these 5 or 6 questions are possible questions that can come in your interviewing for a third-party risk management position. Good luck, and let me know how it goes. All right, guys, I was a bit all over the place. So the next round, I will try and stay organized. I hope you were able to follow still.